Ten slides, 10 minutes. The time starts now.
Yay, you remember this one? So 10 in 10. We've got Roy. Roy's here, everybody.
Hey, welcome, Roy.
So
Thank
Roy,
you.
Right. I've got a question here. Very simple, very basic, but it always does my head in. What is project assurance?
Right. Well, project assurance is assurance that relates to projects, obviously. The simple answer to what assurance is really anything within an organization, within a project that provides confidence and even better, improves confidence of successful outcome, successful project delivery.
Right.
That's a sort of short headline answer. A slightly longer answer is it's really everything to do with risk. And if you think whenever an organization tries to do something, there's risks associated with it, and assurance really is everything you put in place to try and ensure those risks are properly managed and controlled and checked and etc.
Okay.
But it's confidence is the word to remember.
Right. Okay. So Roy is going to be our first 10 in 10 of the new monthly edition of PMO Working from Home. And to be fair to Roy, you only just found out about 15 minutes before we came on here. He's got his 10 slides. He didn't know it was 10 minutes. So let's bet that Roy might just go slightly over, or it could be the absolute professional and be bang on time. We'll find out very shortly. Roy, do you want to start sharing your screen?
Right. Okay. So professionalizing project assurance. So that's really 10 minutes to try and talk to you about what I think is something that is emerging. Thank you, John. Very useful. I've got a copy in front of me. It's something I think where I know PMO has been there in the past around professionalizing PMO. That's where half of PMOs come from. And I think risk management was there 10, 15, 20 years ago. And there is an emerging type of person who actually spends maybe a full-time career, or at least a significant part of their career in a project assurance role. And the key point really is where does it fit? Where does project assurance fit? If you think about where assurance fits in your projects, the projects you're involved in, you'll probably find actually that there's a whole load of functions that provide assurance. It's assurance in terms of standards, systems, processes for making things be done in a particular way. It could be more like internal audit, carrying out audits against good practice and reporting to an audit committee. So they all have an involvement in providing assurance. And there's something called integrated assurance, which you may not be aware of, and it's an approach to bring all of that together, to consolidate it, to collaborate, to assure there's proper collaboration. But that's really sort of outside of what I'm trying to get at here. It's the person who is a project assurance reviewer. Where do they belong? Because they probably don't belong in any one of these. They may have come from somewhere else. So yeah, where do they belong? And also, wherever they belong, where is the definition as to what they should be doing, as to how competent they are? Where would they go to get training and certification for it? Each one of these areas, for example, internal audit, they've got a professional body, Institute of Internal Auditors. They've got a competence framework. They've got qualifications, trainings, and standards. All of these areas around here, all these bubbles have got those, but from their own particular perspective, and not just talking about projects. So it doesn't really exist for the project assurance profession. So really the next question is, well, what makes a profession? And there's an awful lot on Google around this. A lot of academic work's been done around what actually makes a profession, what makes a professional body. I just pulled out a few things which I think are key components of profession that we need to consider in terms of assurance. And the two I wanted to focus on mostly actually was about standards and competence today within the 10 minutes and however many minutes of the 10 minutes I've still got left. Talking about standards, the short answer at the moment, there is no standard for how to do assurance in projects. If you look at it from the project point of view, there are UK standards that mention assurance. So there's a project management standard, BS 6079, and there's also a government standard, project delivery. They both talk about assurance, but there's actually not an awful lot in there to tell you about how it should be done properly. There are international standards, my ISO 21505, 502, 503. Again, they all mention assurance, but nothing specifically on assurance. So there's no standard you could go to, international UK, that says this is the standard for good practice. Clearly, APM has its body of knowledge, the 7th edition, and there's an awful lot more in the 7th edition of body of knowledge about assurance than there ever was in any of the predecessor ones. In fact, I think in the box 6 there are about 2 mentions. In box 7, there's, I don't know, almost too many to count. And I'm pleased to say the assurance SIG, which I started in 2008 at the APM, was largely instrumental in getting far more into the body of knowledge around assurance. So there's a lot of pointers in there, a lot of sort of wordy guidance, but nothing very detailed, and certainly nothing to standardise against. And the assurance SIG, we've produced some guidance, which is perhaps getting a little bit closer to a standard. There's a guide to integrated assurance, guide to project auditing, and the measures for assuring projects, all of which are really good reference places to go as to how to do project assurance. That's probably the closest we've got currently to a standard. I am actually in conversation with the relevant committee of the UK British standards about developing an assurance standard for assurance, but it's in the very early days of that. But I'm hopeful that something will appear in the future. So that's standards. Next thing then is competency framework. Now there's some challenges in putting a competency framework together for assurance. The first one there, people don't, a lot of people go into assurance and they're only there for a period of time, maybe just part of their career. Whereas you've got other people who are, maybe they will always be in project assurance for the whole of their career. The competency framework needs to cover both of those types of people, and there's probably more in the latter camp than there in the former one. Actually, there's certainly these days at the moment. Projects, is it for projects or assurance generally? And there is normally very often assurance, as I showed you on that bubble diagram on the second slide. Assurance in a project isn't really only a part of an assurance, a wider assurance around internal audit or health and safety or quality assurance. So it needs to fit in with corporate assurance mechanisms. So the competency framework needs to be, well, what is the competence? This is a competency framework for people only talking about assurance. How does it deal with the fact that a lot of assurance needs to couple in with non-project assurance as well? And then the final challenge there is actually there's a plethora of existing competency frameworks. Probably every one of those blue bubbles that I had on that diagram on the second slide, they've probably all got their own, at least one competency framework. So do we take those? Do we start afresh? What? How do we come up with something which is works for project assurance professionals and doesn't conflict with all those other ones that already exist, that they may actually already be compliant with or following? There is work being done on this. I know the Nuclear Decommissioning Agency and Network Rail both are working on trying to do something internal to their organisations around the competency framework for project assurance. Neither of them have got very far so far. The APM has its competency framework, which is, I pulled out a couple of bits. This is actually, as of about a week ago, out of date, because APM have just launched the revised competency framework, and this was a slide I did a few months ago. But I suspect that the assurance won't have changed an awful lot between the two versions. So it talks about assurance in very focused ways around quality management and independent assurance. There really isn't. There is nowhere near enough in there for someone who is an assurance professional, project assurance professional, to rate themselves against in terms of their assurance work. It needs an awful lot more than that. I have started some early discussions with APM about developing a bubble on the side of this that would cover assurance more specifically. Whether that will actually come to fruition, don't know, but I'm optimistic that it will do. I think it's and that may actually prove to be the way in which we actually get a competence framework that we can use for the assurance for an assurance profession. There's also the good old House of PMO competency framework, which is a year old today, as Lindsay was saying just now. It has some excellent stuff in there around competencies around assurance. I can say that because I helped Eileen and Lindsay with a particular part of the competency framework. So from a PMO professional point of view, there is certainly a go-to place to go to get some guidance around it. Again, there's actually quite a lot. If you look at the book, there's a few pages. There's a lot of really good stuff around assurance competencies. But maybe it could be developed into something which is more general for non-PMO people. Mention this. I'm going to be providing some. If you wanted to know more about, as a PMO profession, you want to know more about product assurance. It's good practice. What works, what doesn't. Then there's a 2-day course that PMO Learning launching. I've developed for them. It's first 2 days of 21st and 22nd of February. And we do really cover everything from every part of assurance that applies to projects. So you do not need to have much background at all in assurance to learn, and you will come out of it with a much better understanding about how assurance and projects work, and will allow you then to move on to the role of the PMO. No, I'm going to go back on that. Don't want to show that. Don't want to show that slide. I was going to show that slide, but being guillotined there. I don't know. Where does that fit in on 10 minutes? So probably under 10 minutes, actually, aren't I?
What's it done?
John, what's the time with Mr. McIntyre?
It's 9. You're on mute. I can't believe it.
I'm on mute. I'm on mute. My goodness, my God. Do you know what? Look at that.
Brilliant.
Oh, you see, always the consummate professional, as we've grown to know and love.
That's pretty good. That is.
So that really, that's leaving on a cliffhanger there, because that takes us on to the question, which I think Lindsay is going to pose. Is that correct? So I have to give up sharing screen, presumably now, do I?
Okay, so there you go. There is Roy. People didn't know Roy. Now you know Roy. Make sure you connect with Roy. He's Mr. Assurance. He'll give you the confidence. That should be a strapline, actually, on LinkedIn, Roy.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can have that.